Everything you wish you could ask. Straight up, to the point, no escape.
Okay, so who got their facts wrong?
You never get the answer if you don't ask the question.
Do you regret your involvement?
News done different. The Peg this week with John Youngberg.
Welcome to The Peg This Week. I am John Youngberg, and conversation is what this show is all about. And joining me today is City Councilor Gord Steeves. Nice to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We also have Mr. Dwayne Brothers, Assistant Superintendent of Seven Oaks School Division. Thank you for being here. And Glenn Tinley, thanks for being here. Of course, you are the President of Studio Media Group. It's a mouthful. We love to have you on the show. I want to hear what's inside your heads with these topics. I'm going to start with you. We're talking about the federal election tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and find out what is going on. City Councilor, one of the biggest questions people are asking, and I've heard it from many, many people, is why? Why another election?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's no good answer to it, I'm afraid. I've been mortified at where this election has gone, frankly. I think it's been one of those elections where on almost a nightly basis we're dealing with some faux crisis of the day and some alleged allegation someone's making against somebody else. And as a politician, I can tell you these are damaging experiences when there's not good issues on the table, because what they do, in my opinion, is they drive people away from the process in droves. I'm hoping that, and I actually thought the debate was a good venture, but I'm hoping over the course of the next few weeks that we can get away from some of the, I guess, the information vacuum that exists in this election. But you're right. The problem here is people are not happy about the election, and frankly, they have good reason not to be. There's no reason to be happy.
They foot the bill for $290 million in the 2008 election. Be footing the bill again. Is it just a matter of political wrangling? Is it?
Well, I'll pass.
Well, I mean, I agree with you 100%, and this is exactly the reason why we have large percentages of our population who are not getting engaged in the political process, especially young people, and that's only going to continue when they see the kind of wrangling about things that really aren't important to them. Yeah, it's not a good thing.
And the communication style of Prime Minister Harper, I'm going to throw this to you, Dwayne, as we're chatting now. The way he converses, the way he carries himself, as opposed to President Obama, for instance.
Well, they're two very different people.
Well, of course they are.
Same generation, but very different. People talk about how many people actually voted in the last American election, and Obama had an ability to really reach out and connect to the gut, if you will, to a large percentage of the population. He did it. People rave about all the stuff he did with the media and social media, but he also he actually communicated, and he actually got lots of his message on the ground as well.
Well, you both brought up the point of the younger voters. We're talking 18 to 24. That's 2.6 million Canadians. Glenn, we talked about this off camera at one point as far as how much the social media plays a part in an election like this as far as getting the younger voters.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I have not seen from the candidates is I think they're trying to get social media involved. I think President Obama in the U.S. He set a new standard, and I think a lot of in Canada anyway, they're trying to sort of mimic it or copy it or get on board with it, and they haven't really done that. And I think the other thing going against them is you've got this massive voter they don't want to get involved. There's a total disconnect because we've now had federal election, provincial elections, municipal elections. Now some of these are set. The municipal elections are set. The provincial elections are set, but the federal elections kind of keep coming. So people have just said, what am I voting for anyway? I think if you ask the average person on the street, they would almost say, what election is this? Like, who should we be voting for this time?
That's exactly what I'm hearing.
In there. One of the worst things that modern day politicians can do is just say, I got a Facebook page, I got a Twitter account, I'm with it now, and I can connect with young people. That's simply not going to happen. Obama not only used that, but he also had a whole fleet of young people who really knew how to use it. And I think young people, if they just know, find this person's sending me tweets or they got a Facebook page and expecting that's going to really connect with them, I don't think so. It has to go much deeper than that.
And people have to believe in what they're putting out there. I mean, the people that are responding to and getting a Twitter message or seeing something on Facebook, on any social media, they have to believe that what they're doing this for the reasons other than just, well, we want to be seen as cool, so that 18 to 24-year-old voter is going to jump on board with us.
Well, they'll see right through that.
Absolutely,
they're not going to pay attention to that. I mean, because they're smart. These youngsters are smart.
And what you have to remember, I think, is I'm a little scared about using the Obama election as the sort of, it's become the example of social media in the context of elections. I would emphasize, though, that in that election, there was first a concern that existed, a real concern with the American government that I think young people actually had in their souls, and I think social media allowed them to sort of connect on that concern. I can tell you politically, the reason politicians, in my opinion, haven't been able to use social media all that well is because it is an incredibly disparate and scattered method of communication and media. I mean, this is, information generally is is getting more and more difficult. This isn't, it's not the 1950s anymore where we all watch the same 2 television channels. Everybody is spread out all over. And I still remain skeptical of the idea of social media in the context of elections. It is proving, even as time goes by, exceptionally elusive in terms of how politicians are trying to use it. In fact, with the exception of the Obama election, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single example of anybody else who has been able to use it effectively. And I wonder if maybe it's because the issue existed first, and then social media came on to grab onto it. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, let's go to the issue. You brought this up right out of the chute, that a lot of people don't even know what the issues are with this election. All of a sudden, an election's called.
Just go and ask somebody on the street and ask, why was Parliament dissolved? What was the catalyst reason of why the election was called? And I think you get 3 or 4 different answers, from contempt of Parliament to the Bevoda situation. I mean, all these different things played into it. But as Gord Steve said, there's not one thing that people can say, this is what this is about, here's the topic we're trying to address or what we're trying to get around. Because I think people feel pretty good about the economy, there's a turnaround, there's things happening, so why are we doing this?
And regrettably, unfortunately, at the end of this election, we're probably going to come out of this with a very similar result that we had going into the election, which is only going to drive the cynicism rightfully even deeper, which is a scary thought again.
Which comes back to me about young people, and I hear what you're saying about the disparate nature of social medias today, but in fact, that's where the kids are. That's how young people communicate now.
Sure, I have 22 and 20-year-old, I know.
And it's only going to get more and more and more. So I believe politicians and people who are in organizations like school divisions and other forms of government need to find ways to get involved in that game, because that's where the kids are.
But you can see it's not just politicians. I mean, there's all sorts of business enterprises, private interests. Everybody is trying to find a way to capture social media. But the difficulty, and I would say the beauty of it, is that it is incredibly difficult. I mean, this is not Hockey Night in Canada, again, in the 1950s, where you know that 18 million Canadians are going to be watching it on Saturday night, and if you buy that ad space, you'll get that much hit. This is something where, I mean, if you just stop and think for 10 minutes about how are you going to capture the Facebook or the Twitter market or the LinkedIn market, it is an incredibly difficult thing, and marketing minds around this world have not yet been able to figure out how to do it, to my knowledge, because nobody seems to be able to do it very well.
You know, I was just going to go to you.
Well, you know what, it's interesting, because I remember going back 10 years ago when the internet was 10 or 12 years ago was starting to email. I mean, things like that were catching on. And I was traveling a lot for business in a previous life, and people started saying, well, you don't need to travel for business anymore. You just go online and you just use a webcam and you web conference. But business travel has actually increased. I mean, other than recessionary dips, business travel is increasing year over year over year. And the reason is because people like face-to-face. Social is still getting in front of one another. Now, I haven't run for politics, but I would hazard to guess that as a politician, you might use social media in one way, but wouldn't it be great for politicians to actually get out and knock on doors or do town? Like the one thing that Obama did that I think combined, I mean, I don't want to use this as as Gord said, this shouldn't be the end-all be-all of a way to run an election, but he did town hall meetings where he brought people into a room and said, let's talk about the issues, let's talk about the topics. None of the federal candidates are doing that in any way, shape, or form, and I think they're missing the boat. I mean, if you look at the way that, I don't think people have a tough time of who they're going to trust, why they're going to trust that person, who's going to lead this country. I think people are kind of wish-washy on what way that might go. And I think doing something like that is getting in front of the average person on a one-to-one basis or in a group basis and combine that with social media. But however,
I like
that's
that
what you
point
got to do.
about the combination.
Yeah.
It's not one or the other. I mean, the key thing, and I hate to bring up Obama again, but it wasn't just the Facebook and the Twitter and all that social media stuff. He followed it up by having people who were on the streets talking to young people on a day-to-day basis. It's going to be that combination thereof.
Well, and Gord's run for politics for a long time. I mean, as a city councillor, when you're running for politics, you're out, you're knocking on doors.
And it's almost impossible now to find that commonality of experience that people are having. And I think what's going to be interesting is as we move forward as a society, as a world population, where are people going to be interested in maintaining that commonality of experience? I mean, there's thousands of television channels, there's thousands of radio channels, innumerable websites, and more every single day, and all sorts of different social media. I don't know if we are ever going to get back to a spot where people are going to have that same commonality of experience. And I mean, going back to sort of the federal election, the issue at hand, I mean, we'd better figure out a way in this country to deal with the idea of minority parliaments in this country. Otherwise, we are going to rip this country to shreds in terms of voter apathy. And because there is no prospect, in my opinion, of majority governments in the near future. The Conservative government might get there this time. I don't think so. But they're the only party that has even a chance of doing it in, I would say, the next 20 years, arguably, unless there's some seismic shift. So if we're still talking about the federal election,
I believe we are.
We had better find a way to not trigger these things on some sort of whim every couple of years, or it's going to get worse.
Absolutely.
Well, coalition, I mean, look in the UK and other countries, I mean, coalition governments do work. It's a fear factor here with the coalition government here because of the bloc. So, you know, they bring that into play, that they're going to tear the country apart. But I agree with Gord. We're going to have, I think, a string of minority governments. And if that's going to be the case, then maybe we need to start looking at some sort of an agreement between other parties to say, look, we need to just govern the country. Because the average person on the street just wants to know that health care is looked after, that the roads are being fixed, that schools are going to be built, and that their kids are going to be taken care of, and daycare, and all these things that are important to them. Just figure it out, guys. I mean, that, you know, guys and girls.
Well, I think you're onto something there. I mean, given the, the nature of the country, I think there's a healthy percentage of people who are quite fine with there being minority governments. They would just like them to last longer, but they're quite fine having minority governments.
I couldn't tell you the difference in the last few years whether minority or majority. I mean, Stephen Harper governed as if it was a majority, and just there was never that topic maybe to push them over the edge. So it just seemed to go just fine.
Well, you know what? We're going to wrap this up. We've got about a minute left. Let's go back to the point real quick. Bullet answers here. What do we do about the apathy? What do we do about the younger voters? We talked about social networking. We decided that, well, we didn't decide, but there's got to be another way.
Well, yes, sir, go ahead.
Young people will get involved. You have to find the issues that are really important to them. We got tons of kids and young people in Winnipeg and all through this province who are engaged in sustainability. They're engaged with dealing with poverty. They're volunteering in soup kitchens. You got to touch base with the issues that are important to them.
All right.
Fair enough. I agree with that, but I would say let's bring this back. Voting is a responsibility in your society. Let's not say to people that we owe you something and we have to make it attractive for you to vote. It should be back ingrained in this society through our school system, whatever means we have, that this is a democracy. It's a privilege to live in a democracy, and you have a responsibility to vote. People accept all sorts of responsibilities in life, and that has to be one.
All right. We could talk for hours about this. And speaking of that, if you've missed any of the PEG this week and you want to see more, go to itvwinnipeg.com where you can catch it anytime. I'm John Youngberg. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
We'll see you next time. Welcome back to the PEG This Week. I am John Youngberg, and this is the second segment of our show. So happy you're with us right now. We're rejoined by Mr. Dwayne Brothers, the Assistant Superintendent of the Seven Oaks School Division, and City Councilor Gord Steeves. Thanks for sticking around during a commercial. And new to the panel, Realtor Mr. Glenn McAngus. Nice to have you as well. Thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about the growth in Winnipeg. One of you mentioned it right before we went to break, and what a coincidence is that's what we are talking about. We have stories in the papers, stories in the news, new Canadians coming in all the time. Glenn, I'm going to throw this at you right out of the chute. Are we keeping up with the demand for the affordable housing? We have a lot of people coming in from all over the world. Housing market, are we providing enough?
I think we are. There's no question the entry level is continuing to increase. You know, at one time you come to town, you could buy a house for $100,000. That house now is at probably $200,000, and then ultimately they continue to escalate from there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the city, some people look to the city for answers in this. Is the city doing anything about this?
We do, yeah. We have granting programs specifically in the downtown. I mean, if we're talking about affordable housing, if we're going to be involved in housing, we want to direct it towards certain parts of our city that we think require more residencies, and that to us is specifically downtown. It meets the base requirements of affordable housing, kind of higher density stock for younger people, more amenities, less need for a car, all of those sorts of things. We have granting programs right now on a per door basis to encourage developers to come in and build. We don't like to get overly involved in the free market of housing, because obviously that's a dangerous thing for a government to do. But we do offer incentives for developers to build in certain areas where we feel it's advantageous to the city. Right now we're focused on the downtown to try to get more units there.
When you brought up the pricing of beginner homes, for lack of a better term, are we talking the suburbs? Are we talking established neighborhoods? Because the city's sprawling, obviously,
Yeah.
and you mentioned, you know, basically focusing on the downtown area. Is that what you meant by the cost of the housing there? As we're talking suburbs?
Yeah, right around the city, though. You know, any part of the city, the escalation, the entry levels are increasing pretty much everywhere.
The neighborhoods where I'm working, we're seeing a large turnover in Maples.
Okay.
I guess it was developed, what, 30,
Yeah.
40 years ago?
Yeah.
And also with the whole Amber Trails development. And what my understanding is for a lot of our families who are new Canadians, there's a lot of those quite large houses that are having suites, in-law suites built into them.
Right.
And I think that is certainly helping some folks with the affordability issue.
Let's talk about your department, the school issue, the ratio with the influx of new Canadians. Students to teachers.
Oh, you know what? We've been holding it pretty. We run a pretty lean operation in Seven Oaks. We do not have a very large board office, and right now we're just doing the staffing right now. We try to hold our staffing to student ratios around 20 to 24 students right now, and that's where we're trying to keep it to. But the only way we can do that is if we don't have a whole bunch of consultants and those types of things at the board office level. Because we work very hard at that.
Obviously, I mean, that number is going to go up.
Well, I mean, we try to receive from the province on an annual basis. As our student population goes up, we get further grants. And so the last couple of years, we've been able to do that. So for the last 2 years consecutively, we've been adding about 400, 450 students per year.
Wow.
And we've been hiring. I mean, well, this year alone, I'll go to post probably 2 weeks from now, when we'll be posting probably 50 teaching positions.
The projections in Winnipeg, if you're interested in terms of population growth,
Sure.
are over the next 20 years, we're expecting about another 225,000 people in the capital region. 180,000 of those people will likely be living inside of the city of Winnipeg, and we anticipate as a city, in terms of our growth inside of our boundaries, will be out of land in about 13 years, give or take. The two largest groups are, as has been mentioned, newcomers, immigrant populations from out of the country, and Aboriginal people, who are the fastest growing interior demographic, and coming in from outside of the city but within the province.
Well, let's talk about projected problems here. Are we keeping up with the housing?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, there's you know, the Waverly West subdivision. There's, you know, and again, the Waverly West subdivision is you know, expanding, and my understanding is there could be 6 subdivisions in that area that would be the size of White Ridge or Lindenwoods. So they've got land there, I think, for maybe more than 13 years. But
Our issue obviously is about keeping up with the growth. I mean, if we have all these young people coming into our neighborhoods, do
That's
we
a lot of
actually have
people.
schools? So if you think about your typical school being roughly 400 students, we're actually in the last 2 years needing to add another school per year, and we see that rate continuing. I think in the last 2 years alone, we've added somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 portables. And this isn't just isolated in 1 or 2 of our schools. We have this kind of thing happening in our entire school division with 21 schools.
The interesting thing is Winnipeg is following growth patterns that you see in other cities. You're
Right.
from the Boston area. You
Yes,
see in the Boston area, most people live in higher density houses, smaller houses, row housing, walk-ups, those types of things. The projected demand in Winnipeg is going to be tilted towards higher density uses in terms of housing over the course of the next 20 years. That's what we're hearing from our economists, is that the demand for housing is going to move away a little bit from the traditional standalone house in the suburbs to something that's higher density to meet different demographics. But the thing about Winnipeg that makes it so attractive is that you can still have that beautiful house in the suburbs for something that resembles a reasonable price.
Absolutely, absolutely. But on the other end of the spectrum, getting away from the schools and whatnot, can the city handle this? The infrastructure of the city with the influx of people. We're talking transit, we're talking the water system, the whole shebang. I mean, that's a lot to handle.
Well, actually, interestingly, the converse is true. The more densely populated a city is, the more taxpayers you have. The value of housing doesn't go down, even though there's more houses that are more densely built inside of a city.
True.
I mean, the ratio of taxpayers to land is actually a good thing, the higher that it is. I mean, Winnipeg's about five-size the island of Manhattan, for example, but they have something like 15 times as many people. So they have proportionally that many more taxpayers for all of the infrastructure that they service, which is why they have good infrastructure there. These are the types of things that are good, not bad. More people, higher densities is actually good for infrastructure.
Now, roughly, what is the occupancy rate right about now? Where are we sitting?
I think we're at about one. You're talking about occupancy. I'm not sure.
Well, I know the vacancy rates are hovering, are sort of
Around
been fixed
1%.
around 1%.
Yeah, you just
That's what I was
1%,
getting at.
yeah.
You're talking vacancy rates. Yeah, 1% is.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
And as far as I'm aware, the assessments on our 4-year cycle, I think the assessments went up something like 65%. I mean, now I'm speaking a bit anecdotally, but yeah, I would say that housing prices have doubled in the last 10 years. Is that fair? Yeah, at least.
Doubled for sure in the last 10 years.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I bought.
And then everywhere in the city.
I bought about 9 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's doubled.
It would
So,
be doubled,
yeah,
for sure.
But the strain on the.
Could I borrow a couple bucks?
Sure. See me after the show. Oh my goodness gracious. The influx. I want to get back to the young people for just a moment, if I could, with you, Dwayne. The influx of the kids in schools and keeping up with the demand of teacher-student ratio. Somewhere down the road, kids are going to suffer if they don't have that ratio.
Well, that's
Do you
true.
feel they're keeping up as far as the expansion of the schools?
We're keeping up. I mean, government is coming to the table. This year they announced we're going to be having a new K-8 school that will be built in the Amber Trails area. It'll be built in the next couple of years. We're working very hard in the Riverview area to have a K-6 school built and to do a bit of an expansion at West Kildonan Collegiate and at Garden City Collegiate. So those kinds of things are being contemplated. We need that to continue. We're going to continue to work very hard to keep our ratios very good. We've been very aggressive with our teacher hiring. This year we interviewed somewhere in the neighborhood of 260 teacher candidates. Did the same thing the previous year. And with 3 faculties here in the province of Manitoba, and us being only one of several school divisions that are growing, so far we're being able to bring in very high quality teaching staff for our schools.
Fantastic. So do you think we're keeping our head above water with this?
Well,
Across the
I think
board,
we're
from
gonna
the
need
housing to the
continue
schooling?
To have the schools coming in at the same time and going to the right places in the city where the population's coming. That needs to happen. And I think the different levels of government working together with school systems, we also need to make sure that we're getting services to where they're needed. I mean, we have a large number of new Canadians who are moving to the Maples area and to Amber Trails because they feel very comfortable in those neighborhoods.
Right.
There's lots of people, there's
Right.
lots of relatives. But I think if we can to make sure that we're getting things like immigration services that are locating in those areas as well, as opposed to necessarily just having them downtown.
I was just about to get to that. You're a mind reader. The government providing the services, are the services being kept up with the influx of new Canadians? Because it's a daunting task. I mean, you have language barriers, you have job issues.
It is tough, and that's one of the challenges with relying on immigration as a population driver. If you're going to do that, you have to take on the added responsibility of having those services and those supports in place, and properly done, they're very expensive.
Sure.
So while we talk about immigration and its importance in terms of maintaining population levels, that really is only part of the answer. There's all sorts of stories, probably Dwayne would know them better than I, but we are bringing over young people in certain circumstances who have gone through horrible life circumstances, and we are transplanting them, 17-year-old boys from Africa who have grade 2 reading levels, who have seen horrific things, stuff you and I couldn't even imagine. These kids, to succeed in this society, are going to need a lot of support, and that has to be recognized. And if not, you're going to have problems.
Absolutely, because it can go the other way as well.
Absolutely.
We get the whole crime side issue, the whole poverty issue without those services, obviously. Well, so do you, in your opinion, in your line of work, do you feel that enough is being done?
As far as with the immigration, for sure.
Okay. Dwayne?
I think we're going to continue to struggle with it.
Okay.
I think
The
we're
numbers
doing
are
a
just gonna
very,
go up.
very good job. I know in the school division we're dealing with language, obviously,
Sure.
is a huge issue. So we're really starting to really think about English as an additional language. We're trying, a really good thing that we have with our student-staff ratio is we're trying to make sure that every kid gets to go to their neighborhood school, as opposed to having one center in one part of the school division that's going to have all of the immigrant kids. We'd like all of these new Canadians to be able to go to their local school and our teachers to develop really strong, effective relationships with them on a one-to-one basis. But that's going to be a continuous challenge for us. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I know in the city, of course, in the government level and whatnot, there are services to help people deal with, like I just said, the language barriers and whatnot. In the school systems, when you get some young kids from another country who are, maybe feel intimidated, maybe don't understand the language that well, what's in place in schools?
Well, again, every school division will do business in slightly different manners. The key thing for us in Seven Oaks is around relationship building.
Okay.
And we believe that we can have those small ratios. We're really talking to our admin teams that if you have a new family coming in, for example, in January, rather than just escorting them to the classroom and putting them in, or bringing them down to the resource teacher, let's make sure that we have time for the teacher to meet with the family as a group, together with other supports. Let's also network with other branches of government for services to do some wraparound services to help these people become successful. Because I think, if I could just be really quick about this,
You can be as quick as you want.
there's something really good about this. Yeah, there's deficits here that we have to continue to struggle with, but my goodness, the flavor to this city is being added to tremendously.
See, that's the huge upside, the cultural
It's a huge upside.
influx.
And we see these young people and these families and what they can do to impact Winnipeg and have Winnipeg become more of an international player as these people have relationships with other people in other countries, I think is fantastic.
All right, excellent stuff. Real quick, Glenn, just off the cuff, what are the hot spots in the city right now?
I would say probably, pretty much everywhere, but North River Heights and, the South End, Waverly West, anything around the university is popular. Sault Ste. Vital, it's
Waiting for that.
Yeah. Nice plug. There we go. Oh, my goodness gracious. Anyways, gentlemen, thanks for joining us here on The Peg this week. I want to remind our viewers at home, if you missed any part of the show or any episode of The Peg this week, just go to itvwinnipeg.com. You can catch up with us there. Thanks again. I'm John Youngberg. We'll see you again.